Und jetzt in Choppers Political Podcast.
I think overarching it all, we've got to beat the hell out of the Conservative Party, bring them to their knees until they're begging, and that's where we need to get them.
Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast, where I bring you the best guest gossip and stories from the heart of the GB News studios here in Westminster. It was this week, when Reform UK, a challenger party with just 5 MPs and 100,000 members, took what I think is a major step forward in becoming a serious contender at the next general election to Labour and the Tory parties, the two established ones, by hiring a money man in Nick Candy. Candy, a billionaire property developer, immediately pledged over £1 million donation to Reform UK. I understand another £3 million was pledged by other business people the morning that he was announced. That's a huge amount of money for a party which so far has raised just £250,000 in one go from its chairman, Zia Youssef. And it got me wondering, why on earth do rich people give their hard-earned money to someone like Nigel Farage? How can he attract this sort of donation? What is their return on capital, if you like, in terms of thinking of it like a business investment? So joining me later on this podcast today is Aaron Banks. He, of course, donated £1 million to the UK Independence Party, UKIP, back in 2014, when it was led by Nigel Farage. More of that later, but first, this is the week when Home Secretary Yvette Cooper started to deliver on her promise to work more closely with EU countries to tackle illegal migration. Yvette Cooper signed a pact with her German counterpart, Nancy Faeser, to allow German authorities to tackle the gangs in Germany and choke off the supply of small boats. But will it work? And is this deal ahead of a deeper arrangement, perhaps on other areas of cooperation with the EU, perhaps freedom of movement for the under-30s, when Sir Keir Starmer meets with the EU President Ursula von der Leyen in the new year? Joining me now on Chopper's Political Podcast is Miguel Berger. He's the German ambassador to the Court of St James's, or the ambassador in the UK for the German government. Welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast. Great to have you on, and thank you for introducing the podcast in German. I've got your present to take back to the embassy.
Great. Next time I bring you one with the German and British flag. We have one. Yes.
Or a stein of German beer. I want a stein. That's an enormous great stein would be good. We met at the Home Office this week.
Yes.
Because what's happening in this country is there's a massive issue, about the small boats crisis. You've had your own issues there with migrants from Syria going back years. The issue here is crossing the channel.
Yeah.
What's happened is we've seen the first fruits of this new relationship between the UK and German governments on tackling upstream where these boats come from. Can it work? And what will happen? How will this change happen?
Yeah, so what we signed today, not today, we signed it 2 days ago, Christopher, is an action plan on migration, and it will mean in practice that we will enhance especially our police cooperation. And we discussed with Yvette Cooper, the German Minister of the Interior, Nancy Faeser, the question, what can we do jointly, for example, in countries of origin and transit? If we take countries like Iraq, Turkey, or others in the Mediterranean, because in the end, the refugees which will show up at the channel, they come through Europe. And so it makes a lot of sense to tackle these challenges together. The second point is really what can we do jointly to put more law enforcement pressure on these smuggler networks, on the illicit financing, and how can we enhance the practical police cooperation?
And part of that involves, as explained to us, there might be more to it, the warehouses with small boats ready to take people across the channel. Those are in Germany. That's one thing you can crack down on. Is that right?
Some of them are in Germany. Let me give you one example. Just last week, we had a massive French and German police operation against these networks, confiscating boats, but also detaining smugglers. And Christopher, I was, for example, then very surprised that in the British media, which focused so much on the small boats, a massive operation with 500 German policemen involved didn't even come up in the news. That was for the French and for us a big surprise, because it could show, and it is an excellent example of our cooperation.
Was the UK involved in that?
The UK was involved. UK supported it. So we had Europol involved and Eurojust. So it was a coordinated operation, which shows what we can do if we work together. 500
police. I mean, that's a big operation.
It was a big operation.
I can't report all the news in the world at GB. I do my best at GB News, but that certainly was one we should have covered. I don't know what. I will look into it after our podcast has concluded. What's in it for Germany in helping control the UK's illegal migration problem?
What is in it for Germany? I think the fact that the smuggler networks are the same, operating in the Channel, operating in Germany. We have other networks which work in the east of Europe. You know that from Belarus, there is a political operation to bring in refugees from Russia, from Belarus into the European Union. These are also part of these networks. And if we work together and put the law enforcement pressure on these groups, and go after their illicit financing, we can do something that is good for Germany, good for France, but also good for the United Kingdom.
Why are they not staying in Germany, staying in France? Why are they trying to get to Britain, do you think? What's your view on that from Berlin?
Only a very small group. I mean, you mentioned that there is such a big attention, obviously, on the small boats. We all are against irregular migration, but, if we compare the figures,
how many
you have
Germany
35,000. These are the figures we got in 1 month. Or countries like France, we are tackling much, much bigger problems. So we have now 1.2 million Ukrainians. We got more than 1 million from Syria, who are now looking at the situation in their home country. So if we add everything up in Germany, we have 3.5 million refugees. So
in what length of time?
I would say those who arrived, that's the total number, but the majority arrived in the last 10 years. So it's quite a big number, and it's obviously also
Germany is around
population in Germany is 83 million in total. 83 million in total.
So it's a growing issue, isn't it? And it's, of course, you can't comment on the election. The election takes place. Olaf Scholz is behind in the polls. We'll see how that plays out early in the new year. But yeah, immigration is an issue, a shared issue for the European Union big players, Germany and the UK.
Yeah, it is a common issue. And you might ask, why do we need such an action plan? And it obviously also has to do with the fact that after Brexit, the legal situation changed. With the United Kingdom outside of the European Union, it means, for example, that the possibility you had before with the Dublin Agreement to send people back to where they were registered first in the European Union doesn't exist anymore. So no country is willing to take refugees back. And on the other side, the United Kingdom is now outside of the Schengen information system of many European data pools and police work. And that's why these action plan, but also the Calais group meeting, then Yvette Cooper this week,
Calais group,
the Calais group of the main countries who have to do with the crossing in the Channel. So with France, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, United Kingdom. That is why we need to enhance the police cooperation, to create new structures in order to tackle these crimes.
It's a common cause. I guess, yes, the 30,000, 40,000 a year is a fraction of the numbers you've been facing from all those different conflicts you raised there. Are we making a bit of a fuss about this, or is it right to be concerned about it in the UK?
I think every country is very rightly concerned about irregular migration, but the numbers are obviously very, very different.
That's right. The Rwanda plan was an idea which the last government did, which was deporting migrants arriving here legally to Rwanda in Africa, and they couldn't return. There was reports that Germany is looking at the similar idea, offshoring, processing idea in Rwanda. Is that right?
No, it's really different. It's different. What we are looking into is the possibility, can we process people who ask for asylum before they cross the Mediterranean? Because if we look at the channel, I think this year we have had 70 people who drowned. In the Mediterranean is much, much more. And so the question is, can we process them in countries like Morocco, Tunisia, Turkey, Libya? Is there a possibility to do that? But we want to do that within the existing legal frameworks, and it is very challenging. And the other question is, even if people are processed and are rejected, does it mean that they will not attempt to cross? So we don't know, but it is definitely on the political agenda.
But not Rwanda, not using UK infrastructure. There were reports in this country.
There were reports. That was
not the case.
A voice of some politician, but no, there is no intention to do that.
Okay. You mentioned Brexit. You mentioned Schengen. Schengen, of course, had meant freedom of movement for Brits. That ended with Brexit. There's talk of under 30s freedom of movement. Is that something which Germany would like to see, i.e. Brits here and Brits from the European Union under 30 can have freedom of movement between the two UK and the trading bloc of the EU?
What we don't want is freedom of movement, and we fully respect the British red line to say no way back to freedom of movement. What we would like to do, and we call it youth experience or youth mobility, is the question, what can we do, especially for young people between 18 and 30 years old, that they can learn the language, that they can experience living, working, studying in the European Union, but also here. But the point, which is very important to underline, Christopher, is that the basic idea is this people, a limited amount of people would come temporarily and then go back. So they would not migrate to Europe or to the United Kingdom. They would stay for a short amount of time.
That's good for us all, is it? I mean,
it's good for us all, and it's good for business. It's good for business because I get many complaints from the city, from German banks, others. They can't have trainee programs. German industry complains about skilled labor. So we have many obstacles which are also not good for our economic relations.
Government here says no plans for movement under 30s, but there's been talks already privately with the German government?
No, not yet. And this would be negotiated by the European Union.
Oh, I see. You can't do individual deals.
So we would not do it individually, but you have seen that the Prime Minister is going to meet Ms. von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, somewhere in spring next year. And then we will start talking about the whole reset, because so far it could not be done. Why? Because the European Commission was not up and working. It was just confirmed some days ago. And so in spring, we are going to start these talks.
And will this be on the agenda, freedom of movement for under 30s?
There will be many things on the agenda. The Security Pact, which is proposed by the British government. So cooperation on a wide area of topics, respecting, obviously, the red lines.
But including the idea of under 30s?
It will be included, yeah.
Yes.
And also the question of Erasmus program,
yes,
where the United Kingdom in the last minute opted out of it. So all of these things will be again on the table.
And that, I mean, can you see that? I mean, you've been here. How long have you been here in post? I should ask.
2.5 years.
Yes. So, but after Brexit, you arrived. Do you understand Brexit? Do you understand why people voted to give back power to elected politicians that Brussels feels a long way away? I'm interested if you understand it, because I think there was definitely a culture clash between the European Union and probably the last Tory government in understanding why Brexit happened.
There are different reasons why Brexit has happened. There were many promises, which we have seen now were not very realistic. In the end, to be honest, first of all, I would say in Germany, we very much regretted the United Kingdom leaving. Sadness. Surprise also that this really happened. If I look at the geopolitical situation, Russia's war of aggression, the whole international situation, we would be stronger together, no doubt. And that's why we need to rebuild a strong and close relationship. For us in Germany, and this is very important to understand, and the same is valid for many on the continent, The European Union was a reaction to the disaster of the Second World War. It was a peace project. It was a project to say the European Union and finding solutions on our challenges means that we will never again go back into conflict among each other. And as a peace project, but also as an economic project, it has worked very well.
It started as a trade project, an economic idea, and it went political in the mid-80s, and that's where I think Brits kind of lost faith in the idea. Do you understand that? That's where I think it happened. I think that's where, until the EEC, European Economic Community, was the Conservatives campaigned to be part of that in 75.
Yeah, there are people who maybe had a problem with that, but in the end, you are right, we started with coal and steel, but then given the international challenges we faced, we moved into the political. In Germany, nobody has a problem with giving up a certain amount of national sovereignty, like on trade, for example, in order to have a strong internal market and a strong European Union. Because in the end, look at it, we are 450 million consumers, 450 million people. That is a factor in the world. And doing it alone and given the geopolitical challenges, it will not be easy. And many people might have had also illusions about the possibility.
And the UK has a choice now. We see it in politics, a choice between getting closer to the European Union, meeting Ursula von der Leyen in the spring, meeting the German leaders in Paris and Italy as well, or going towards America. It's a challenge which I think has been there for 30 years for the Prime Minister of the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, Donald Trump is just saying, come over to our side, let's do a trade deal with the UK, ignore the European Union.
It might come, there might be such an offer, but in the end, if we look at Ukraine and all these challenges, we can only have an impact in Washington if we act together. And if together we develop ideas, we develop proposals and make these to the new US administration. Only then we can have influence. If we are divided up, then we will not have the impact we would like to see.
Certainly there'll be a deeper partnership with the UK, EU. But as you say, you understand and respect the customs union and single market. Those areas are off the table. They are off the table.
We obviously respect the decisions of the British government. That is absolutely clear. But nevertheless, despite these red lines, there is space to cooperate more.
Of course. And just finally, Miguel, just you and me talking. I mean, can you imagine the UK re-entering the European Union at some point? Is that a long-term ambition? Politics can change.
Politics can change, but, we work on the basis of realities, and this is the reality, so we deal with it.
Classic diplomatic response from a senior diplomat in the German administration. Miguel Berger, thank you for joining us today on Chopper's Political Podcast. How do you say goodbye in German again?
Auf Wiedersehen.
Of course you do. Thank you. Auf Wiedersehen.
Dankeschön.
OK, back to Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Earlier this week, billionaire property tycoon Nick Candy had this to say to me on the morning he was announced as a new treasurer of Reform UK.
I love our country. I think our country is amazing, but our country is in decline. I've got friends across the political spectrum. I've got some very good friends in the Labour Party. I've got some very good friends in the Tory Party, and they will always be my friends. But I genuinely believe it's time for a change in direction, and that change in direction is Reform and Nigel Farage. And I'm not a politician. I don't want to be a politician. But what I can do is I'm very good at raising monies for funds for businesses. I'm very good at helping operations of businesses. And I will make sure that Reform UK has the right funds to run their operations and businesses correctly.
And Nick Candy backed up his words with a pledge of giving over £1 million to Reform UK. That's 4 times bigger than the biggest donation it's received so far from Chairman Zia Youssef. And he said he wanted to raise over £40 billion. That's £40 billion by the next election, possibly with the help of Elon Musk, the world's richest man. Will Musk donate? Do you want him to donate?
I don't know. I'm the fact that already today I'm going to say retweeted because re-X doesn't really work, but he's retweeted already a post about Nick becoming the party treasurer, and he said interesting. And I know Nick's got connections with him as well. Look, the fact that he's supportive of us, we're delighted with. If he wants to give us money, and it's legal money, we'd be thrilled.
There will be a chance to speak with Elon, and if he wants to donate, of course, we'd love him to donate. If it can be done properly and legally and through the right mechanisms, then absolutely fine.
So I started to wonder for this podcast, why do rich people want to give their hard-earned cash to Nigel Farage and his party? What is in it for them? Joining me now is a businessman who gave £1 million to Nigel Farage's UK Independence Party back in 2014. Aaron Banks, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast. How are you?
Good morning, Chris. Great, thanks. Not too bad. I'm just come back from South Africa, so really enjoying the weather that much, but yeah.
Yes, it's absolutely grim here in the UK, of course. Now, you're known to political people in Westminster as a big political donor. You gave £1 million back in 2014 to which party?
UKIP.
The UK Independence Party. That was two or three iterations ago of the Reform UK Party, of course. Why do people like you give lots of money to people like Nigel Farage?
Well, I think it's, trying to help an insurgent party, I think is something that, I enjoyed doing. I mean, I'm thoroughly sick and tired of UK politics, and it does need shaking up from time to time.
And when you gave that money, that £1 million, I was there, I think, in a hotel in Bath when you walked out with Nigel Farage. It was at the end of the Tory conference, and I was sent from the conference to there, and we thought it was going to be an MP defecting. I think Mark Reckless had just defected at the time. And then you walked out next to Farage. We thought, who's this bloke? And then you said, I'm giving £1 million to him. We couldn't believe it.
I think everyone was very disappointed, to be honest. It wasn't Bath, it was Bristol. It was a house where we do weddings and things.
Oh, was it Bristol? Yeah.
The entire press pack was assembled waiting for a Tory MP defection. It was little old me, so yeah.
And when you walk out, I mean, what make you do it because you want to help an insurgent party? You believe in the idea of leaving the European Union at that point. Is that why you do it? And you believe personally in Farage himself, I suppose.
Well, I've been upset about Maastricht back in the 90s, so it wasn't a sort of spur of the moment thing. It was something belief I've held for a very long time about leaving the European Union. But I think, with Nigel this time, it's very different to UKIP. I mean, as I told you the other day, I went to the donors' lunch, or patrons' lunch, I think it was called.
Yes, that was in Mayfair. An entire restaurant booked out, 80 people in there. I was outside the door broadcasting for GB News.
Yeah, I didn't see you. I must have been able to slip in there quietly, though, which is good.
I was round the corner.
I mean, obviously, attracting someone like Nick Candy as the treasurer is amazing.
Yes.
He's a serious businessman. But I think moreover, what it does is if you start to attract people like that, it makes it okay for other people to do it. And we've seen that with Trump to a degree, that people come out and back him, and other people will as well. And it kind of makes it okay to do it.
And that's, of course, why we're speaking. Nick Candy's he will give over £1 million to Reform UK. He says he's had several pledges running into millions. I understand it's £3 million pledged this week already. That's £4 million in Reform UK's back pocket. Now, the most it ever received until now was £250,000 from Zia Youssef, the party's chairman. This will be transforming, won't it, for a party like Reform UK?
Well, I think that's just the start of it. I mean, he was clear at the lunch that he didn't feel he could ask people for money unless he had actually committed money himself. And he made it absolutely clear that he was out to raise more money than the Conservatives and Labour put together. So I think, yes, I mean, he was talking about £40 million so that Reform can compete on level terms with the Conservatives and Labour.
That's an incredible amount of money. And can Reform UK cope with that amount of money coming in? I mean, the other parties are established. They have treasury departments, compliance issues. They're well known to the Electoral Commission. All that kind of, all the back office of the other parties can handle the money.
You could say they're very well known to the Electoral Commission. They keep getting repeatedly fined for transgressions. And I'm no stranger to that myself.
Yeah.
It's very hard not to break their rules. But no, I think the other issue, but you said Zia had given £250,000 to the party. But more importantly, he's working full time, running the thing. And to have someone of that caliber actually at the top of the party, cracking the whip, for want of a better expression, there's a very different this time round of professionalism. And, the aim is to win. It's not to, just run as sometimes was a talented amateur operation. It will have the money to really go after the Conservatives and Labour.
Is that realistic? I mean, can Nigel Farage be Prime Minister? I mean, it's a 26% uplift in the polls from where they are at the moment, required to win, according to reports out this week. I mean, is it credible, or is it just, frankly, rich man's fantasy, the whole thing?
Well, look around the world. I mean, the world is turning to more radical solutions. You have to look at Trump, you look at Argentina, you look at Italy. You say is it a fantasy? I don't believe it is. I think Nigel's been around a long time. He's been proven right in virtually everything he's ever said. It may take a bit of time for that to sink through to the public, but I think his popularity is rising. And it's a bit like the Trump thing. People voted for Trump not because they liked him necessarily. Yeah, they thought lives would be better with him as president. And it shows you that a Marmite character can get elected. So I think it's all to play for. I think as well, you have a situation where Labour have, managed to become, lose their popularity almost overnight. And in a way, I think that's just a reflection of, the two-party system. It's very difficult to break, as you know, Chris. Yeah. I heard Jacob Rees-Mogg talk about it the other day, saying there's no room for two parties on the right in British politics. I would argue there's only one party on the right in British politics. And actually, really, the Tory party needs to split. 2/3 need to go off to the Liberal Democrats where they belong, and the other third need to coalesce around Nigel. And
that's, you mentioned Trump there. Trump won by tunnelling into the Republican Party, didn't he? Surely that's what Farage needs to do. As you say there, maybe either he becomes leader of the Tory party, or a third of the Tory party, as you say, joins Reform, and that becomes a party of the right.
This was the same as Republican Party. There's sort of rhinos, for want of a better expression.
What does that mean again? What's rhinos again? Republicans in name only.
Name only. Yes. Which is basically where the Conservative Party is. They just elected a new leader who's a globalist in the sense of she argued for more immigration when she was actually in government. She's a libertarian. I think they've frankly elected. Nigel can't believe his luck, I don't think, that he's got Kemi Badenoch on one side and Keir Starmer on the other. I mean, the conditions are absolutely perfect for an urgent party.
But do you worry that so much hangs on him personally? I mean, were Richard Tice leading the party, I just don't think Reform would be anywhere near the numbers in the polls at the moment. I mean, it really is it's the Farage roadshow, when without Farage it quickly falls away.
Well, you could say that of Boris, couldn't you? When Boris won a big majority, it was a Boris roadshow. You could say it was a Miss Thatcher roadshow. Yeah. This is the way politics works, whether you like it or don't like it. It works on big personalities. And I can tell you that the Conservatives must be looking across at Nigel and Reform and being absolutely terrified at the moment.
The big question also in Westminster is, will Elon Musk donate? It looks like there's been some very public footsie between Farage and Musk on Twitter this week.
I'm sure he will do, but not to the extent of £100 billion, I don't think.
No. How much? How much?
Well, it was £100 million, wasn't it, the original?
Dollars, 80 million.
Dollars, pounds, that's still a lot of money. But I suppose he's got UK companies, and that's traditionally, it's acceptable to donate through that. Let's see what happens. But I've got a feeling, one of the things Nick Candy said was, well, we mustn't rely on, mega donors. We've got to get out there and build, branches, which is happening very quickly now. and energize real people, you know. I think overarching it all, we've got to beat the hell out of the Conservative Party, bring them to their knees until they're begging. And that's where we need to get them.
100,000 members, £25 each. That's a good start, isn't it? And of course, the forecast is from the Reform UK's forecast is that will go above the Tory party sometime next year. Well, the Tories are on 130,000.
Speaking to Zia the other day, on the day of the donor lunch, although he wasn't there, 700 people joined in one day. So those sorts of numbers are joining up. I think as well, Reform is capturing something of what Trump did as well, with the kind of Gen Z, generation, that they realize that, they're pretty well stuffed economically in terms of buying your own home, having a family, and doing the things we would have taken for granted. And I think they're starting to turn to people that might have more radical solutions for that. I mean, the guy in Argentina, they said none of this will work and it would be a disaster. He's got inflation into single digits. He's got investment up. He's actually recorded a surplus for the first time, I think, in 60 years in Argentina. So it can be done. But, the brilliant thoroughgoing, ocean-going basket case, the civil service needs to be slashed. We need to get radical solutions to problems. And I think that's where Reform doesn't have the baggage. It can come up with policies, and it doesn't have the vested interests or the baggage that these two old failed parties have.
Big question, of course, is: are you going to donate? You've given money to Farage before. Are you giving now to Reform UK?
Well, not at the moment, but never say never. I mean, I think lots of people are trying to help Nigel in any way they can, and of course, I will do whatever I can.
That sounds like a yes, then, but not just yet.
Well, I'm not going to talk about donations on Chopper's podcast as much as
you can do.
How much as you might want me to.
If you just finally, Aaron Banks, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, no worries.
What are the odds, do you think, on Farage being the Prime Minister in 2029?
I think it's getting shorter and shorter. I mean, I've seen the political betting. He's now the favourite at 5-2. I think Starmer's, the Labour Party haven't got a clue how to fix the Tory mess that was left over. And the Tory Party, they're not going to get elected in a million years. So I think it's all to play for. And you're almost in a three-way battle now. If you look at the polls, all three parties are in the 20s, which means the legacy parties are starting to fall away quite badly. And I think that gives Reform a unique, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reshape British politics, which is why when I looked around that room, it was very different to UKIP. There were some serious business people there that liked what they were being told.
Well, it could happen. I mean, you think he is favourite in your world to be PM? I mean, do you think now that's what's the bookies
It's
say?
4.5 years. And I think I think our job is to knock out the Tory party or to damage them so badly that, that they're out of the game. And I think, if anything, if I've got a criticism, we should be attacking them harder because they're the ones that have run the country for 14 years. They've got nothing to say. They really shouldn't be in the business of criticising Labour.
But don't you worry? Just finally, you're letting in Labour again. Looking at the poll just from last week, there's a forecast based on the Tories on 26%, I think Reform 24%, Labour 23%. Based on those numbers, with that split right-wing vote, it looks like the Labour would win the election and form a coalition with the Lib Dems.
I'd argue it's not a split right-wing vote at the moment. There's a lot of people voting Tories that don't know why they vote for them, to be perfect, blunt. I think for historic reasons, they can't be doing much thinking about it. Because the last 14 years, I've struggled to find one Conservative thing that the Conservatives have done. And all we've seen with Labour is you're just getting the old Conservative policies, but faster. The Conservatives are in the business to manage decline, and the Labour Party are in the business of, accelerating the decline. I think the country will be ready for radical solutions before too long. But also as well, I think we're facing economic headwinds, which will play into Nigel's hand, because, you know, with the Labour government, they said that they were going to focus on growth, and then all the policies they're coming out with are anti-growth.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see falling growth, the changes that they've made to make it more expensive to employ people. It's going to add to unemployment. And you might see a good old-fashioned recession. We're actually due one.
Aaron Banks, thank you for joining us this week on Chopper's Political Podcast. And thanks again to Miguel Berger, Germany's ambassador to the UK. And thank you to you for listening and watching wherever you are. I tweet at Christopher Hope on X and email me chopper@gbnews.uk. If you enjoyed this show, please do tell your friends. If you really enjoyed it, please do leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. That helps other people find this show. Thank you to the brilliant team of GB News colleagues behind it, Mick Booker, Jeff Marsh, Rebecca Nunes and George McMillan here in the studio with me, and also Dominic Crute, who's been helping me all week. And most of all, thank you to you for listening. If you want more Chopper in your life, and who doesn't, catch me during the week on GB News and at midday on Wednesdays for PMQs Live, when Parliament sits with Gloria De Piero. Keep up to date with our best political reporting on our website, gbnews.com. But from me in a very freezing cold Westminster, for now, cheerio!